The word introvert feels like an understatement when referring to our male lead. The reason he became a software developer was simple. It was a job that required little socializing. He could work alone, surrounded by peace and silence. But everything changed when she was transferred to his department. His name? Donggu Kang, but at work, everyone called him Max. She called him, asking who she could talk to for access to a certain page in the workspace. When he didn't answer, she looked at him and said she had come early since it was her first day on the team, but now she had nothing to do and decided to review some resources. Max glanced at her desk and noticed her things still unpacked. She should have started by unpacking her stuff, he thought. He finally told her that Patrick could help with that. When she asked what time Patrick would arrive, he simply told her that he would come around 10. Silence filled the workstation as they both got to work. Max slipped his earphones on as casually as he could, though he knew it looked a bit awkward, but he just hoped she'd stop talking. A few minutes later, she suddenly let out a loud scream, making him flinch hard in his seat. She asked who was responsible for updating the admin system API page, and he replied that he had written it himself, wondering if something was wrong with it. She quickly said there wasn't, that it was actually very well organized, and added that the rumors must be true. He tried not to react, silently asking himself what rumors she meant and telling himself to stay calm. She kept talking, and he was still trying to figure out where the conversation was going when she suddenly introduced herself as Joy. He let out a quiet sigh. All he wanted was some peace and quiet, but she was doing too much talking. A moment later, another coworker entered the room and started chatting with her about the venue for lunch. The coworker asked if she had coffee yet. Joy said no and suggested to go grab some together. Bills on her. Max glanced at the half-empty cup on her desk, but decided to mind his business. She then turned to him and asked if he wanted to join them, but he declined right away. He added that he wasn't into caffeine. Watching her smile so brightly, he wondered if she was one of those overly friendly people who talk to everyone. She didn't seem bothered by his refusal and cheerfully said they could grab decaf tea together some other time. It was awkward for him, but he still managed to mumble a small, uncertain agreement. Later, during lunch, Joy sat a few seats away, laughing at something another coworker said. Joy is a front-end developer with 5 years of experience, but her real name was still unclear. She was awesome at her job and had a good vibe that made her thrive at work. Max also heard that she had a big social media following and she seemed like a hardworking person. Max gave her a brief glance before quickly looking down at his food. She seemed highly motivated and had a good aura about her. In his mind, he thought she was nothing like him at all. She was the exact opposite of him. Later, they all headed to a nearby coffee shop. The coworker standing across from Max asked why he was there since he didn't even drink coffee, and another casually told him to reserve a meeting room at 1 o'clock for her. Max just stared for a moment, then left without a word. As he rode the elevator back to the office, irritation filled his mind. They were jerks, he thought. Wasn't decaf drinks sold at cafes too? It wasn't like he wanted to join them. And the other lady, asking him to book a meeting room when they weren't even in the same department. Shouldn't that kind of task go to her assistant instead? Still, none of it really surprised him. When he stepped into the office, he sighed quietly. Next month would mark his first full year at Code and Canvas, meaning he would finally be eligible for severance pay. His eyes drifted to a laptop left open on a nearby desk. Joy's laptop. She'd left it in plain sight. Curious, he leaned closer and froze. It was a job portal. She couldn't be serious. He glanced at the open tabs. Deadlines, interview schedules, company names, all right there on her calendar. Was she really trying to announce to the whole office that she was planning to leave? He remembered when she had said next time about the decaf. She made it sound like there would actually be a next time, even though she was planning to leave and she just moved teams too. The thought annoyed him. That was the thing about this company. It was full of hypocrites. Everyone pretended to care, but deep down it was every person for themselves. Then he paused mid-step. He couldn't believe she just left that job portal open like that. Unless she didn't care. But what if someone else saw it? He began pacing, thinking it over. This caught the attention of some coworkers. They began whispering to each other like he was some sort of weirdo, which made him flinch. Unknowingly, a piece of his cough drop fell beside her laptop. He then sighed and dropped heavily into his chair. Whatever. It wasn't his business what she did with her career. He noticed the now empty cups on her desks. Wasn't it half empty before she left? Still, his thoughts wouldn't rest. He glanced at the time, trying to distract himself. It was 12:31. 23 minutes later, she was back at the office, holding 2 coffee cups, breathing heavily like she ran all the way up. She noticed something was off. Her laptop was closed. She glanced at Max, but he had already dozed off at his desk. The coworker from asked if she was okay because she had rushed out of the cafe. Joy simply replied that everything was totally fine. Just then, Max's alarm buzzed and he woke up with a groan. He took off his sleeping mask, still clearly tired. Then he noticed a cup placed in front of him. He looked up to see Joy smiling slightly, saying it was for him. Surprised, he mumbled a quiet, "Thanks." He glanced at the cup and noticed the little D written on top, for decaf. Did she actually remember? He thought. She really was one of those overly considerate types. But then he noticed her gaze. She kept staring at him and it made him uncomfortable. Why was she looking at him like that? Unless... Oh no. His eyes darted toward her laptop. She knows I closed it, he thought, panic rising. Should he just admit it? No, then he would look like a total creep. His thoughts ran wild, one after another. What if she got angry at him for touching her things? He should have minded his own business. He was doomed. Why couldn't he just walk away when he had the chance? He looked back at her and saw that she was still watching him. Then, she smiled, her expression calm and curious. Her gaze drifted toward his sleep mask, and she asked him where he got it and if she could find it online. Max froze, completely thrown off. His mouth opened slowly before he managed to say he would message her the link later. Inside, though, he was screaming for someone, anyone, to save him from the awkwardness. After a while, Joy sat quietly at her own desk. Her cheerful smile had faded, replaced by a thoughtful expression. She stared down at something resting on her table. The cough drop Max had unknowingly dropped on her desk. Even now, Max had no idea how much his life at this company was about to change. The next morning, Max walked into the office, giving a little detail about himself. Well, not out loud, just in his mind. The reason he came in early every morning was simple. Most of his coworkers liked to show up around 9 or 10, which gave him about an hour of complete silence. He liked to make a cup of chamomile tea just to calm his mind and body. Before diving into work, he'd go over whatever code he had worked on the day before, refactoring it, making it cleaner, better. Then a loud sound broke the calm. It was his favorite part of the day. At least it used to be. Max turned his eyes and saw Joy, casually munching on her chips. She glanced at him, and noticing the way he was staring, she asked if he wanted some. Annoyed, he told her that he was good, and wondered why they had to sit next to each other. After a long while, it was finally lunchtime. People naturally gathered around Joy like moths drawn to a flame. Max felt his annoyance spike as he slipped on his earphones. All he wanted was a quiet nap. Couldn't they take their chatter to the lounge or somewhere else? When someone mentioned that Joy had been coming to work earlier than usual, she said it was to help her be more efficient. In his heart, Max called her a liar. It was obvious she was just trying to leave work early to prepare for interviews. They kept asking her questions, and she answered them, even as sweat formed on her forehead, making Max groan. Why was he feeling uncomfortable just from watching? Later, Max found himself talking with Doyle Park, known as Patrick, in the office. Patrick pointed out that it was clear Joy was trying to get out of work early. He went on about how, around this time of year, everyone suddenly wanted time off or went on mini vacations, rambling without pause. Max pulled out his phone and sighed. He couldn't believe Patrick had dragged him into this gossip. When he asked Patrick how he could be so sure and heard Patrick's confident responses, Max thought to himself that Patrick could be childish, but sharp too at times. Then Patrick plopped down on the chair next to Max and told him that he wanted to ask if he could deploy the admin feature that was supposed to go out that night by 7. As Patrick leaned over and began explaining the details, Max groaned angrily. Was this really the reason he had dragged him over here? Patrick stretched a drink toward him, saying it was his way of saying thanks. Max groaned inwardly. Patrick was such a jerk. Later that evening, Max sat at his computer typing endlessly, silently swearing at Doyle that one day he would get back at him. Joy passed by and noticed the drink on his table. She reminded him that he didn't do caffeine. Max said it was just there as a reminder. She leaned forward thoughtfully and mentioned that the next time she bought a buy one get one free caffeinated drink, she would give it to him, but he waved it off. All he wanted was to get out of that place. As Joy turned back to her laptop, she noticed a message from Max about the latest version of the admin feature being deployed. She wondered if it wasn't Patrick's job, and Max just sighed. Couldn't she tell that Patrick pawned off his work to him? It was like she was trying to rub it on his face. He mumbled that Patrick mentioned something about going apartment hunting and quietly wished for a change in topics. Then he asked her why she hadn't gone home, and she said she lost track of time analyzing a program. He stared at her and wondered why she'd put in unnecessary work when she was going to leave any day now. After a while, she asked him if he thought it'd be awful to change jobs when things are so busy at the office. He stared at her in shock, and she quickly said that it wasn't about her but a friend of hers, obviously. He held his chest and wondered why he was panicking. She quickly added that it was for a very good friend who wanted to leave her job. He thought to himself that she should be more inconspicuous about it if she wanted to leave because Patrick was already onto her. He then told her that it was her life, her career. If she sees a better offer, it only makes sense that she leaves, making her eyes widen at his response. She turned to him and asked him if he thought so. He wondered quietly to himself if someone who's been here 5 years was asking career advice from him. Just then, a message popped up. The new admin feature was live, meaning their work for the day was all done. He turned away and she just glanced at him. Later that evening, they both stood side by side on the road. He wasn't sure how it happened, but they ended up leaving work together. As they crossed, she told him that she took a bus to Yonja Station and asked about him, to which he told her that he took the bus as well. She laughed and told him that she was asking about where his stop was, and he told her he lived close to Ori Station. She excitedly said that they lived so close to each other, while he boringly thought to himself that it wasn't so late to walk to the subway station. As they crossed, he thought it was so awkward, and as they sat waiting for the bus, he wondered if it'd be natural to just pull out his earphones. Then she told him to open his hand and threw chocolates in it. She told him that to clarify, they were for him to eat, not reminders to leave them on his desk, and he muttered a small thank you, though surprised. As she turned to look if the bus was coming, he wondered why she gave it to him. Just then, she leaned close to him and whispered in his ear that he should consider it as compensation for covering for a slacker of a senior at work. He felt his heart beat so loud just as she pulled away. He told himself to calm down, that she was just friendly to everyone. Even still, she's been giving him a lot of things since she moved to their team. Then, he stretched out a cough drop to her, asking her if she wanted one. She excitedly screamed that she loved cough drop and began to talk about it, and he wondered what she was talking about. As she unwrapped it, he was just glad that she liked it. Suddenly, Joy paused and took a good look at it. Then she asked if it was grapefruit flavored. She then called out his name, making him look at her, and she asked him if he saw what was on her laptop the other day, making him widen his eyes in shock. They kept staring at each other until the bus finally arrived. Max hurried inside, leaving her standing at the stop as the vehicle pulled away. Once seated, he let out a long, exhausted sigh and lowered his head onto his lap, feeling a strong urge to escape everything around him. The next morning, Max followed his usual routine, brewing chamomile tea, preparing for the tasks for the day. He checked his time and couldn't believe he had shown up to work at 10. For him, that was a first. When he looked toward Joy, he knew exactly why he was out of sorts. He had barely slept, his mind replaying the moment at the bus stop over and over. He reassured himself that he was going to be okay. If things went south, he could call in sick and take the day off. Then a sudden shout broke the office silence as someone announced they had a problem. The woman approached Joy and asked if she handled such issues. They spoke briefly, and when the woman mentioned needing someone familiar with the process, Max let out a small cough. Both women turned toward him. The next thing he knew, it was 7:45 p.m. and he and Joy were seated side by side, troubleshooting the issue. He wondered how he ended up involved, as if he hadn't stepped into it himself. Joy typed nonstop, following the guidance he gave while he sipped his coffee. He told himself this wasn't part of his job. He didn't understand why he was doing it. But his thoughts quickly drifted back to the previous day and her unexpected question. She must have been referring to him closing her laptop, or maybe she had simply been guessing. He chose to stay calm until the end of the day. Then, as if she read his mind, she brought it up immediately, making him flinch. She clarified that she asked him the question because of the grapefruit-flavored cough drop. She found the same one on her desk a week ago, and she had merely wondered if it belonged to him as well. His hand trembled so much that the cup he held shook with it. Joy told him not to worry about the comment she made regarding her laptop screen, insisting it was nothing. Before she could say anything more, a loud crash startled her. His coffee cup had fallen to the floor, shattered. She asked if he was okay. He stammered, saying it slipped from his hands. When he reached down to gather the broken pieces, she stopped him, saying he was going to hurt himself. She stared at him for a second, noticing how nervous he was. Then she gently tapped him and asked him to look at her for a moment. He flinched before meeting her gaze. She stated plainly that he had seen what was on her screen. At that moment, sweat began forming across his face. Before he could process anything, his hand moved impulsively, and he drove it straight into the broken shards on the floor. A sharp cry escaped him as the pain hit. After Joy finished treating Max's injured hand, she cleaned up the mess. He immediately began explaining himself in a frantic rush. He insisted he hadn't meant to see anything and apologized repeatedly. Joy reassured him that he had nothing to be sorry for and even thanked him, saying he had only been looking out for her. She handed him a cup of water, and when he told her he hadn't mentioned anything to anyone, she smiled and said she believed him. Then her expression dimmed. She admitted that, if anything, she owed him an apology. Her transfer had been intended to reduce everyone's workload, yet she found herself considering leaving altogether. Max told her she didn't need to apologize. It was her decision to make. Privately, he found himself thinking about leaving as well. Joy began reflecting aloud on her work life. When she first joined the company, the pace had been grueling. She had spent her nights working tirelessly. By her third year, she had finally gotten used to it, and things became easier. But the ease felt unsettling. She believed she was overdue for something new and didn't want to remain stuck in routine or complacency. She felt time pressing against her, pushing her toward courage and change. And just when she was in the process of taking a leap, he caught her red-handed. She immediately let out a nervous laugh and apologized for oversharing. Max hadn't even asked why she was job hunting, yet she had laid everything bare. He drifted into thought, comparing her decisiveness to his own situation. He always said he wanted to quit, and yet he remained in the same place day after day. Then he told her something he hadn't expected to say, that he found her choice admirable. The words took her by surprise. He explained that he wished he had the courage to do what she was doing. She was choosing to step away from comfort and safety. He continued speaking, saying that many people dedicated their lives to companies that cared nothing for their well-being or future. So she was right to put herself first. It was a smart decision. But when she didn't respond, he wondered if he had gone too far. He tried to soften it, explaining that the company wouldn't collapse simply because she decided to move on. Even then, she only stared at him with wide, unreadable eyes. Finally, she lowered her head, gripping her cup, and quietly said she appreciated what he said. The moment the words left her mouth, Max suddenly shouted that he had solved the problem. Startled, she asked what he meant. She hurried to his side where he was working on the laptop. He pointed out the issue with the library, explaining that she was right. She had mentioned an issue with the database, so he checked just in case. He had solved it, and they could finally go home. She watched him silently for a long moment, then smiled and called his name. When he answered, she asked if they could become accountability partners in their job search. Max froze, staring at her in disbelief. He couldn't comprehend what he had just heard. The next day, Max stood outside the office looking like a zombie. He had barely slept in 48 hours, and it showed. One colleague glanced at him cautiously before slipping away, probably alarmed by how exhausted he looked. He remembered Joy's words from the previous day. It was probably what kept him up all night. He clutched his phone tightly, rereading a search result on how to reject someone politely. He muttered to himself, lost in stress, until a sudden tap on his shoulder jolted him so hard he almost leapt. Haley told him to relax and commented on the dark circles under his eyes, wondering if he had been punched. Max ignored the question, addressed her by name, and asked what she wanted. She pointed toward a meeting room, saying Donald needed to see him. Immediately, Max stepped inside the room. The man greeted him kindly. His name? Dugyeon Han, but he went by Donald. He's the team lead of the Commerce Department. He handed Max a cup of chamomile tea, explaining that he made it because he knew Max couldn't handle caffeine. Max thanked him, unaware that the conversation was about to turn strange. Donald began listing the problems Max had been solving, problems that technically weren't Max's responsibility, and Max wondered what direction this was heading. Then Donald looked him straight in the eyes and asked, half laughing, if all that extra work was tempting him to job hunt. Max choked so violently that he spewed out the drink. Donald laughed it off, saying he was only teasing, then shifted to the real purpose of the meeting. He told Max that the company planned to offer him a raise in the third quarter. Max stared back in disbelief. Donald continued explaining that the company preferred investing in its existing employees rather than constantly hiring new ones. As he said this, he watched Max closely, and Max swallowed hard. The man added that their conversation needed to remain confidential, then handed him a card, suggesting that he and Joy treat themselves after all their hard work the previous night. Max stared at the card, confused by the phrase, "you two," until Donald clarified that he was referring to Joy. He spoke proudly about how difficult it had been to bring Joy over from the settlement team and praised both of them as the team's present and future, though Max could only see hollow promises behind the praise. Later that day, Max stood beside Joy's desk, holding the card, and asked if she was craving anything specific. While she checked her schedule for upcoming lunch plans, he secretly hoped she would excuse herself so he could escape. Instead, she surprised him by suggesting they get dinner together that night. That evening, Max sat across from her in a restaurant, drenched in nervous sweat. She mentioned how lucky they were to get that table and mentioned that their food was actually great. Then she continued the conversation from the previous day as if nothing were unusual. Max poured himself a drink in exhaustion, wondering how he had ended up there. She flipped through the menu, searching for the most expensive item, and asked whether he drank, yet placed the order without waiting for his response. He resigned himself to it. Once the menu was set aside, she asked whether he had thought about the accountability partner idea. Max stared at her as she pointed out how much work the company had piled onto him. She said the late nights were brutal and assumed, confidently, that he must have considered changing companies. He admitted she wasn't entirely wrong. Leaving had always been a distant dream, though the conversation with Donald still weighed heavily on his mind. Max told her that many engineers were looking for a change, and he wondered why she was asking him specifically. She responded with a wide, bright smile, explaining that she believed the two of them were different. The statement stunned him. When the food arrived, she began describing things he had done, making him wonder whether she had checked his edit history. She said she noticed a gentle consistency woven into his work, that although he wasn't the fastest, his thoroughness stood out. It made her reevaluate her own approach, and for that reason, she wanted to learn from him. Max lowered his head at the unexpected praise, remembering all the discouraging remarks he had heard from coworkers about refactoring and taking too much time. He asked if she really thought it was a strength. She agreed, then added that there was another reason she chose him. She said she felt he would respect boundaries, which confused him. He wondered what she meant and whether she was already tipsy. Joy said she didn't want him to take it the wrong way. She rambled a bit, speaking quickly and losing track of her own thoughts. He sipped his drink calmly, watching her struggle to articulate. She eventually laughed and admitted she wasn't sure he was following, then clarified her point with a smile. She said she believed he wasn't the type of man who would suddenly confess feelings for her. At that moment, Max choked again, this time spewing the drink in complete shock. Later that night, when Max arrived home, he greeted his mother and walked past her. She pointed out that he was late again and asked whether he had eaten, but he simply said he wasn't hungry. After his shower, as he dried his hair, he reflected on how different the evening felt. Normally, after a long day of work, he would unwind with video games or a TV show, anything that helped him relax and escape from workplace stress. Instead, he found himself sitting on the floor, staring at a message from Joy on his phone. His thoughts drifted back to what she had said at the restaurant. He considered that she might have meant it as a compliment, but something about it unsettled him. The idea of someone assuming he might profess feelings so easily made him scoff. He wondered if she genuinely believed she was that irresistible. Just then, a sudden voice whispered beside his ear, startling him into a shriek. The person wanted to know who the gorgeous woman on his screen was. Max explained that she was just a coworker. The woman, Suwon Kang, Donggu's older sister, sat back in her chair and reminded him of their long-standing agreement. Never date anyone from the office. Suwon had switched jobs 4 times and dated coworkers twice, and now she was single with firm personal rules. Max quickly insisted that the situation wasn't what she thought. Suwon told him to take a good look at Joy, emphasizing that Joy appeared completely out of his league. As she settled back into the chair, Max asked if she remembered her first experience changing jobs. She said she did, explaining that she had spent a great deal of time studying and preparing. Max looked at her in surprise, wanting to confirm whether she truly studied intensely for the transition. Suwon said she had, then asked if he was planning to quit. He replied that he was simply exploring options. She advised him to stay where he was for now, mocking him that socially awkward people like him rarely found workplace environments they could tolerate. Max internally wished he could silence her. Suwon added that studying while working was a smart approach, and that having a study partner or accountability partner would make the process even better. She sat up, grabbed a handful of his hair, and yanked hard while warning that he never knew when he might need to switch companies. Max shouted for her to let go. Before leaving, she reminded him once again that office romance was off limits. Max dismissed her with a tired expression, wishing she would stop lecturing him. The next day, the team was having a meeting about an ongoing project. They addressed some issues that were fixed the previous week, but there was still a problem. To stick to the original schedule of the project, they needed extra help from the dev team. Max's mind was somewhere else. He looked exhausted, rubbing his eyes as if he hadn't slept properly. Switching companies shouldn't have been causing him this much stress. Before he could realize what was actually going on, his coworkers had already dragged him into more responsibilities. One colleague enthusiastically announced that they were counting on him for help. Patrick gave him a playful tap on the shoulder, winked at him, and told him he was so busy lately. Max felt the familiar irritation rise. Everyone seemed determined to pawn their work onto him again. As he followed the group, Debbie teased Patrick about exploiting his wedding as an excuse to dump extra work on Max. Patrick simply brushed it off, claiming that burdens like these were what juniors were meant for. When Debbie jokingly suggested caffeine, Patrick generously declared that coffee was on him for everyone. The offer made Max's hands tremble in frustration. No matter how many times he reminded them he couldn't handle caffeine, they always seemed to forget. The moment made him think of Joy and the unexpected ways she had supported him recently. Meanwhile, at the office, Joy was happily snacking when she received a message from Max asking if she had a moment. The request surprised her, and soon after, the two found themselves sitting together outside in awkward silence. Eventually, Max gathered the courage to explain that he was willing to commit to being accountability partners. He clarified that although he wasn't planning on quitting anytime soon, he had realized that preparing for the future wouldn't hurt. Joy reacted with genuine relief, admitting she had assumed he wanted to reject her proposal. As he studied her, he reflected on how different they were. Joy carried an easy confidence and a bright, infectious energy that made her thrive in the office, traits she never credited herself for. Max, on the other hand, felt like her complete opposite. Yet he wondered if being around someone like her might help him grow. Trying to keep the conversation practical, he asked how they should begin. Whether they needed meetings, structured goals, study schedules, or even a designated place to meet. Joy, however, admitted she hadn't thought any of it through. Max stared at her in disbelief. He found himself questioning whether partnering with someone so spontaneous was a good idea after all. Later that afternoon, a coworker returning from a cafe with 2 iced Americanos paused in surprise when she spotted Max and Joy walking into the office together. The unexpected sight instantly caught her attention. Looks like things are about to get spicy. 2 days after agreeing to Joy's proposal, Max met her at the cafe on the first floor of their office building so they could establish a concrete plan for their accountability partnership. As they talked through different possibilities, he casually asked how the interviews on her schedule had turned out. Joy explained that she had received offer letters from most of the companies she met with, yet she had declined every one of them. She revealed that she had even canceled the rest because she wanted to aim higher. Her new target, she said with confidence, was a unicorn company, an ambitious choice full of potential, equipped with enough resources and manpower to properly support its employees. She mentioned the impressive salaries such companies offered, then turned the focus back to him, asking him where he planned to go. Max admitted he didn't have a clear direction yet. He intended to choose whichever company aligned best with him, and he would figure out the specifics as they progressed. Joy remarked that she was curious about where he would be a year later. The comment caught him off guard, causing him to take a quick sip of his tea as he reminded himself not to overthink. She was most likely being polite. Refocusing the conversation, he emphasized that they still had a lot to organize. He had just begun discussing their next steps when someone behind him repeated his words in a teasing tone. He turned to find Esther, a UI/UX designer, who, like Joy, her real name remained unknown, standing there unexpectedly. Because she and Joy were close, he needed a quick excuse. He noticed Joy visibly panicking beside him, so he stepped in and vaguely explained that Joy had a friend who ran a development study group and he had been asking about joining. Esther seemed surprised. She had always assumed Max went straight home after work to play single-player games, a remark that struck him directly. Max forced a confident laugh and insisted he was always looking for ways to improve himself. But when Esther pointed out that she had never once seen him in the cafe until that day, he realized she wasn't buying any of it. Deciding it was best to flee, he abruptly excused himself to return to work. Joy quickly followed by inviting Esther to accompany her to the convenience store. As Max walked away, Esther called after him, asking if he wanted her to pick up anything for him. He responded with an awkward, half-hearted laugh, saying he was fine. The next day, Max found himself seated beside Esther at the office while she talked endlessly about a feature she wanted him to work on. He couldn't focus. His mind kept circling back to the cafe incident. If she had overheard his conversation with Joy, the consequences would be disastrous. Observing his troubled expression, Esther apologized, assuming what she wanted was too much work for him. He reassured her that he could handle it. She then glanced toward Joy's empty seat before leaning in and casually calling him Maxie. She whispered in his ear that she had seen him and Joy entering the office together the previous day, and noted that he had suddenly become a regular at the cafe, something entirely out of character for him. She also pointed out that the two of them had been working overtime far more than usual. Sweat began gathering on his forehead as he wondered whether she knew the truth. Before he could panic further, she concluded, excitedly, that all of this meant he must like Joy as well. He denied it immediately, but Esther added that she thought he was throwing his hat in the ring like other guys at the office. Max asked what she meant, and she went on, explaining that Joy was one of the most popular women in the office. Many coworkers had tried asking her out, only to get rejected. A few even transferred to other companies after being turned down. Max grumbled that the workplace was meant for professionalism, not emotional entanglements, a statement that impressed Esther enough to joke that he should print it on a t-shirt. She agreed with him wholeheartedly, and he silently credited his sister for instilling that mindset in him. As he attempted to continue the conversation, he noticed Esther looking down. When he called her asking if there was anything else she wanted, she simply said she was finished, then handed him a small sweet. A gift for luck, and he thanked her politely. By the time the night approached and the clock neared 8, he was still at his desk. Chewing on the candy Esther had given him, he thought grimly that even a lucky treat wasn't enough to save him from another exhausting round of overtime. Later that evening, Joy approached him looking noticeably annoyed and asked whether he still had unfinished work. Max explained that he was handling a task for Patrick and would probably need a couple more hours. She suggested they step up to the rooftop for some fresh air, and before long they were standing beneath the cool night sky. He wondered whether she intended to discuss their accountability partner arrangement. Joy explained that she wanted them to hold study sessions twice a week after work. Max agreed, noting that the schedule would still leave their weekends free for rest. As they talked through locations and times, she suddenly lifted her phone, captured a picture of the evening sky, and showed it to him. He agreed it looked beautiful. While admiring the photo, he found himself asking whether she truly believed the two of them could manage this plan. Balancing their jobs, unpredictable workloads, and frequent overtime would be challenging. But she only smiled brightly, saying that of course it won't be easy, but that was the whole point. They were doing it together. He couldn't help staring at her at that moment. As they walked back toward the elevator, she apologized for taking up so much of his evening, and he also expressed regret that she would be going home late. She then wondered aloud whether they would continue calling each other by their workplace nicknames outside of work, a suggestion that left him momentarily stunned. She clarified that it felt a little silly to use their office nicknames when the two of them were alone, and she proposed they call each other by their real names instead. She said his real name, Dong-gu, which made him flinch instinctively. She explained that she had heard Patrick use it a few times, laughing lightly as she spoke, while he clutched his chest as if trying to steady himself. Hearing his real name from her felt unexpectedly strange. When she asked for his last name, he told her it was Kang, and she repeated it, Donggu Kang. Inside the elevator, they stood in silence while Joy scrolled through her phone. He felt as though the elevator was moving slower than usual. Then she suddenly said his name again. When he glanced at her, she asked why he hadn't asked what her real name was. As he prepared to ask for her name, she abruptly announced that she had no intention of telling him. He grew increasingly frustrated, assuming she was simply teasing him. In his mind, it hardly mattered. He believed they would eventually learn each other's names regardless, since most modern phones automatically display whatever name their owners assign. Before he could finish that line of thought, the elevator stopped with a chime. He stepped out and wished her goodnight, feeling smug for pointing out something he assumed she had overlooked. However, before he even reached the hallway, she burst out of the elevator with exaggerated urgency, thrusting her phone toward him. She wanted to show him that the display revealed nothing more than a simple photo of herself. She proudly explained that even if he saved her number, he still wouldn't see her real name because she had intentionally changed the settings. He found it absurd that she had chased after him just to prove this. She assured him that she would restore her original name settings later, claiming she had only been joking. Then added that mentioning it was actually useful because it meant they needed to avoid using work-related channels for whatever arrangement they were forming. Anyone could actually go through your chat there, as long as they had access. After that, she handed him her phone and asked for his number. Despite being flustered, he complied. She mentioned that this method would be easier and promised to text him later. She actually kept her word. That night, he got her text, and with it, her real name, Charon Jang. It immediately dawned on him that after over a year working with this company, this was his first time exchanging numbers with a coworker. As he browsed through the pictures attached to her contact, it became increasingly obvious that their backgrounds were worlds apart. Without their job connecting them, their paths likely never would have crossed. His mind flashed back to earlier when she promised to text him. He didn't know what to make of the whole situation. He brushed everything off and decided to call it a day. The next morning at the office, he entered while rereading his recent chat with Charon. From the texts, he felt it was best to conduct more research over the weekend. As he approached his desk, he noticed someone offering to buy Joy a cup of coffee. She declined gently, saying she had too many emails to get through. The coworker, Junho Jung, known as Jaden, insisted that she was pushing herself too hard. Max tried to walk past without being included, but Joy noticed him and invited him to join them. Jaden immediately commented on Max's caffeine restriction, urging them to be careful with what he ordered. Joy looked momentarily surprised, while Max calmly explained that an iced decaf Americano suited him fine. Moments later, the three of them were at the cafe. While sitting with them, Max questioned why he had even agreed to come. Jaden continued talking nonstop to Joy about the cherry blossoms, and Max's irritation grew as he realized the man was blatantly flirting. During a brief pause, Max cleared his throat, unintentionally drawing attention to himself. His voice sounded more nervous than he expected, but he continued anyway and suggested a place where she could view cherry blossoms. Joy offered him a small, approving smile in response. Soon after, they got a signal that their order was ready, and she went to retrieve it. As soon as she stepped away, Jaden shot Max an intense, irritated glare that made him flinch. At the close of work, Joy slipped her laptop into her bag, ready to head out. She mentioned that during lunch, she saw the cherry blossoms at a nearby park with Esther. She also jokingly pointed out that while they went for a walk, he had eaten lunch alone at the office. Max silently noted that she seemed to enjoy teasing him, and he responded with mild annoyance, explaining that he had been trying to finish his tasks early so he could prepare for their study session. She then extended her hand toward him, prompting him to open his palm. When he did, She scattered cherry blossom petals into it, saying it was her way of thanking him for saving her that morning. Max felt exasperated, noticing the petals scattered across the floor. When she tried to leave, he called her back and told her to clean up the mess. He remembered at the cafe while he was nervously rambling, he mentioned that he had never seen the cherry blossoms because of work. He never imagined she'd pick that tiny detail. As if remembering a courtesy he had forgotten. He crouched down to gather the petals himself, called her by her real name, Charon, and wished her a good weekend. She replied warmly, offering a soft goodnight. When he was finally done, he glanced at the clock and realized it was already past 10. Although his workday was finished, he still had tasks waiting for him over the weekend. When he reached the elevator, he discovered it was under maintenance and decided to take the stairs. While going down, he heard a man shouting and initially assumed an argument was taking place. As he moved closer, he realized the shouting man was telling someone that he no longer had feelings for them. Curious, Max quietly approached. Once he saw their faces, he recognized the man as someone from the business development team. And, to his shock, the person he was speaking to was Esther. He continued watching the two people argue, noting that it seemed as though they were trying to resolve something. He realized he needed to get past them if he wanted to head home, but instead chose to retreat upstairs for the moment. Just as he turned, one of his earpods slipped from his hand, rolled down the stairs, and landed near the guy's feet. He panicked, hurried back upstairs, and slammed the door shut. By the time he got upstairs, he was breathing heavily. He wondered what he had done to deserve all this. He couldn't even leave work when he wanted. He remained seated there, scrolling through his phone. When he glanced at his watch, it was already 20 minutes since the incident. When it grew quiet, he assumed the coast was finally clear for him to leave. He remembered Esther's expression, how sad she looked, but he quickly dismissed it and decided it was none of his business. He opened the door, wondering what could come over anyone to date a coworker. Little did he know that Esther was standing right behind the door. His soul nearly left his body when he noticed her. She had not gone home yet. She showed him the earbud she had found on the staircase and mentioned that she planned to place it in Lost and Found. Internally, he screamed that it belonged to him, but outwardly he merely scratched his head, pretending like he didn't know anything about it and wished her goodnight. He thought to himself that he could retrieve it later. As he walked past her, she suddenly grabbed his hand. She saw past his silly lies. The earbud was his. The other pair was still in his ears, and they were the same color. She asked why he had only one on if it wasn't his, and he stammered another lie, saying that was how he liked wearing it. They stood in awkward silence for a moment before he tried to leave again, but she held on to him and demanded to know where he thought he was going. He screamed inwardly for someone to help him. Moments later, they sat together outside a shopping store, and Esther tried to drown her sorrows in an endless parade of juice boxes. She expressed relief that it was him, Maxie, that had witnessed such an embarrassing moment in her life. She continued talking, laughing nervously as she said she trusted him not to blab to everyone about what happened, then hoped he didn't feel like she was pressuring him to sit there with her. Of course, he said she wasn't, but inwardly, he wished she would release him so he could just go home. She eventually dropped her head onto the table, lamenting how mortified she felt, and continued speaking without pause about what happened earlier with her boyfriend. His excuse for breaking up with her was that she was too clingy, and from everything she explained, yeah, she sure as hell was clingy. Max sat stiffly, sweating and uncertain of how or when to respond. She was almost in tears as she went on pouring out her heart. Max thought about comforting her, but he brushed it off and instead assured her that her secret would stay with him and that she had no reason to feel ashamed. He stood up, grabbed her juice box, and said she didn't have to worry about anything, but they needed to call it a night. She stared at him for a moment, then extended her pinky for a promise. He held out for a moment, just a moment, before giving in and calling her a cab. As she entered the cab, she asked Max his age, suggesting they be friends, but only if they had a 2-year age gap. Max gave a nonchalant response. He said they were coworkers, and that was enough. Esther sighed playfully, saying he was no fun. He took a picture of the plate number before they drove off. Finally, he could at last go home. Esther stared back at him from the cab, almost as if she didn't want the night to end. It looks like our boy has a secret admirer. Back at home, he collapsed into a chair and sighed, overwhelmed by how eventful life had become. His sister soon emerged from the bathroom asking if he was working extra hours for the money and wanted to know if he wasn't going to change his clothes. He responded sarcastically that he was waiting to use the shower, adding that he wasn't getting paid for the extra hours. She then mockingly asked if he could pick up some dessert the next morning from a cafe in Jeonja since he wouldn't have plans. He shrugged, thinking she had a lot of nerve asking for that after the kind of day he had just had. She pressed further, saying he needed the sunshine and he could also see the cherry blossoms. She was really a pain in his ass, but she had a point. He thought back to the moment when Joy had tossed cherry blossoms into his hands, then paused briefly before reconsidering. He told his sister to send him the cafe's address. She couldn't believe he agreed, but happily accepted. The next morning, he was already waiting in line at the cafe. On his way, he had taken a picture of the cherry blossoms. He thought to himself that they really were beautiful. However, the long line outside the cafe irritated him, and he silently cursed the fact that his precious Saturday morning was being wasted like this. While he waited, his phone suddenly rang. It was Joy. He stared at the screen in disbelief, wondering if he was imagining things. Before he could decide whether to answer, he heard a familiar voice behind him. Turning around, he found Joy standing there with a smile. She said playfully that she wanted to know what he saved her number with, that the name he had saved her under was even more boring than the one she used for him. He stared at her in shock as she continued, mentioning that she hadn't known he liked desserts. He wondered what she was doing there. Inside, she asked him what he was doing at the cafe, and he explained the errand he was running for his sister. She smiled, remarking that she could never imagine doing something similar for her own sibling. She then mentioned the cherry blossom photos she had taken on her way there. He remembered suggesting the blossoms near the stream in that area and briefly wondered if that was why she had noticed them, but he quickly waved away the idea, telling himself it was nothing more than coincidence. After they finished at the cafe, Joy asked if he had eaten. He replied that he had not and planned to get food with his parents nearby. She teasingly suggested he might be lying to avoid the situation, and he defended himself, insisting he was telling the truth. She simply waved goodbye and said she would see him on Monday. Later that day, as he sat in a diner, he stared at a message from his family group chat. His parents had to cancel lunch plans, Suwon slipped in the shower again and they had to take her to the hospital. While the server placed his food in front of him, he found himself thinking that they could have eaten lunch together after all. He reasoned that she probably would have paid too, given her longer tenure at the company, and sighed to himself that it was his loss. Still, he felt it would have been awkward to eat together. Little did he know that she was watching him through the glass. When he noticed a shadow and turned, he saw Joy standing outside, silently looking at him. She looked let down and stood in silence for some seconds before walking away. Damn. The weekend passed quickly, and soon it was Monday. Joy was noticeably quieter than usual, and it was pretty obvious. Panic built in him as he assumed she was upset and believed he had lied to avoid eating with her. He stared down at his phone, debating whether he should show her the messages to prove he had not intentionally avoided her, but he wondered if that would be excessive. He slumped to the ground in frustration, irritated by how draining emotional stress at work could be. His phone then chimed with a reminder. He had a study session with Joy after work. He groaned at his own misfortune. As he walked back to his desk, he debated telling her he needed to stay late for work and postpone their session. At that moment, Patrick waved at him, thanking him for the help he had given the week before, and suggested they take it easy this week. Max internally scoffed, thinking Patrick had never actually been helpful, and sat down again, still deep in thought. He finally decided that the simplest solution was to talk to her and clear up the misunderstanding. Just as he began to speak, someone else approached Joy and started a conversation, cutting him off. He groaned inwardly, wondering why nothing ever seemed to go his way. Later that day, the two of them met at a cafe, one they assumed no one from their office would visit. They started by listing ideas for potential projects. Unlike their work assignment, where they were only responsible for a single segment, this required them to handle everything from start to finish. He knew it would be a new experience for both of them. As Joy discussed her ideas, Donggu drifted off and stared blankly. She called out to him, but he did not respond. When she called his name again, louder this time, he flinched and snapped back into focus. Concerned, she asked if he was all right, noting that he had seemed distracted at work as well. He only sipped his coffee shakily. She then asked if his distraction was because he felt guilty about being caught at the diner on Saturday. It was the moment he had dreaded. He hesitated. He was about explaining himself when she apologized. She looked down sadly, and when he asked what was wrong, she explained that her energetic nature often exhausted the people around her. She admitted that when she had asked him to have lunch with her and teased him about turning her down on purpose, she had not fully meant it, and she feared she had made him uncomfortable. He watched her for a moment, then opened his phone and showed her the messages. He explained that something unexpected had come up, preventing him from eating dinner with his parents. She asked why he had not called or texted, and he replied that it was the weekend and he would not normally contact her then. She asked why he didn't say anything at the office, to which he said she had looked extremely busy. She closed her laptop and concluded that they were both at fault, though he was slightly more. He stared at her in disbelief, unable to follow her reasoning, before she suddenly burst out that she had been worried all weekend. As she rambled on, Donggu realized he had never taken her for an overthinker. He reassured her again that it was not what she thought and apologized once more. She finally declared that if he was truly sorry, he should buy her food. He asked whether she liked fried chicken. Before she could reply, she received a text from him, prompting her to clutch her head in dramatic distress. Seeing her reaction, he began sweating nervously and asked if she disliked garlic chicken. She smiled, saying she actually liked it, and he exhaled in relief. She watched him quietly, smiling to herself, while he thought that at least their first meeting had ended without disaster. The next day, Max yawned as he arrived at the office. It was Tuesday, and he desperately hoped the day would be stress-free. His mood soured, however, the moment he saw the meeting room door. Inside, Mickey, the team lead of the business development department, was talking endlessly while Max counted the minutes. Esther sat beside him, smiling as though everything were perfectly fine. Near the end of the meeting, Mickey announced that anyone with questions should contact Andrew, Esther's ex-boyfriend. When he asked if they were okay with it, she smiled like it was fine, but that wasn't the case. Max immediately began sweating and typed nonsense on his laptop. In his head, he screamed for help. He needed it desperately. Later that day, Max stared at a message from Esther, where she joked that she planned to quit her job. He wondered why she would make such a decision over a breakup with someone who wasn't even in her department. In his mind, she could have simply avoided the man at work, ensuring their schedules did not overlap. He sighed in frustration and pinched his cheeks, reminding himself that it was none of his business and that all he had to do was remain silent. Suddenly, a voice spoke very close to his ear, startling him and causing him to sit upright immediately. It was Esther. She laughed, teasing him for being so jumpy before she told him to follow her. They soon found themselves in a convenience store, where she announced that she wanted to repay him for what had happened last Friday, offering for him to take anything he wanted. Max suspected she was trying to buy his silence, but he did not refuse the chance for a free lunch. As he began picking items, he asked her whether she had been serious in her message. She simply laughed quietly. She was explaining her decision to him when she noticed someone. She gestured for him to stay quiet, placing a hand over his lips and then her own. Following her gaze, Max noticed someone speaking on the phone. It was Esther's ex-boyfriend. The jerk was talking about the breakup, and he didn't sound remorseful about it. He looked back at Esther. The sadness on her face was clear as daylight. He didn't do anything. He just stayed frozen beside her. A few moments later, they were seated outside. She was still sad. She explained that she had genuinely wanted to buy the snacks for him, but had rushed out unexpectedly. Max reassured her that it was fine. She then offered to get him a drink from a nearby vending machine. He declined. He couldn't really drink anything in there. But she slid a bottle of water toward him, insisting he could at least take that. Max hesitated, having never had water from a vending machine before. His thoughts drifted back to the conversation her ex was having on the phone. He asked her if she had known about it, and she admitted she had, more or less. He couldn't believe that she was willing to stay in a relationship despite knowing her partner had been unfaithful. Esther clarified that it was not exactly clear-cut cheating, though she had known he maintained a friendship with a junior colleague from his previous company. While fondling the bottle, she confessed that she had suspected something might be going on but had no proof. She then opened the water and took a long sip. Afterward, she asked that he pretend he had neither seen nor heard any of it. They shared a moment of silence, and he agreed, thinking that sometimes silence was the kindest way to be considerate. Back at the office, Max typed at his computer, wondering why he felt so frustrated. Joy noticed his mood and handed him a piece of candy, asking if something was wrong. He said it was nothing. He stared at the candy in his hand before asking whether it was irresponsible to interfere in someone else's problems when one could not shoulder the consequences of their choices. Immediately, the words left his mouth. It dawned on him that he actually said it out loud. Joy simply suggested he had already answered the question himself. Embarrassed that she was taking his question seriously, he tried to speak again, but she told him to let her finish. She explained that honesty with someone was always worthwhile and referenced a previous moment when he had called her choice admirable. He wasn't advising her then, but he was honest with her. She wasn't sure of what was actually going on, but she suggested he did the same thing. Max looked down thoughtfully as he soaked in everything she just said. Meanwhile, in the women's restroom, Esther's got a notification on her phone. It was Max asking if she had a minute to talk. She stared at the message a while, silently wondering what he wanted to talk about. Minutes later, she approached him with a smile, asking if he was bored and suggested the hangout with Joy at the cafe. Max wasn't in the mood for that. He went straight to it and asked why she was leaving the company when her ex clearly bore the blame. Her reaction was immediate. She flinched, taken aback by his words. She laughed nervously and asked where this was coming from. He admitted that he understood she had been hurt, but felt she did not need to suffer more than necessary. She stared at him, wide-eyed, unsure how to respond. After a pause, she stood beside him, admitting that she had not known he could comfort someone. She confessed that for the past month, whenever she saw him, her heart had sunk. She had often felt sudden urges to cry, retreating to restrooms on different floors to weep, only to fix her makeup and return as though nothing had happened. All that made her wonder if she could continue working like that. Max didn't say anything at first, then Joy's advice replayed in his head. He folded his hands and told her that, ultimately, he did not care what choice she made. It was her career, her life. However, he could not tolerate her ex's selfishness and obstinacy, and he thought he would care if he saw the man succeed while she suffered. He added that she deserved to see things work out for her in every aspect of life, and that was all he wanted to say. She asked why he had called her out to say all that in person. He explained that it was because she was skilled at her work. Silence followed for a moment, until he heard a sniffle and turned to see Esther quietly crying, surprising him. He did exactly as Joy advised. Her tears grew more audible, and Max worried that he might have said something to upset her. As he opened his mouth to apologize, she spoke up. She said it was annoying that she actually felt comforted in that moment. Max immediately calmed himself. She nearly gave him a heart attack. She wiped her tears, then mentioned 2 weeks, leaving him confused at first. She clarified that she intended to give the place 2 more weeks before deciding whether she wanted to leave, walking up the stairs as she spoke. Before disappearing, she turned back, instructed him that they should get back to work, and winked. To him, it felt like a fair and reasonably satisfying resolution. As they walked back, Max reflected on how he might finally be free from the emotional turmoil that had been plaguing him at work, nervously scratching his head. They didn't notice a group of colleagues who were surprised to see them together. One of them called out their names, which startled both Max and Esther. And to make matters worse, Joy was among the colleagues. Quickly, Esther hid her face. When Joy asked if they wanted to join them to the cafe, she pretended to make a phone call and ran off in another direction. Max worried that she shouldn't leave him alone in the situation. Joy turned to Max and asked if he was interested, but he excused himself, claiming he had work to finish, and left, while Joy watched him with curiosity. Back at his desk, Max struggled to focus, replaying the morning's events in his mind. He imagined the wild theories his colleagues might be spinning over coffee and hoped they would not turn it into office gossip. When Joy returned to her seat, he debated whether he should explain himself, but even if he tried, he could not decide what to say. He imagined telling her and feared everyone would think something was wrong with him. He took a deep breath, telling himself to relax, stop overthinking, and focus on work. He searched online for ways to calm his mind, and after reading some suggestions, he felt more composed, reminding himself that it was possible no one had given the situation a second thought. Just then, Patrick popped up from nowhere and asked what was going on between him and Esther, noting that it appeared she had been crying. Max glanced around, realizing others were listening, and felt pressured to give an answer. At that moment, Esther approached Joy, requesting to push back their meeting by 15 minutes because she needed to run to the pharmacy. Joy asked if she was all right, and Esther explained that her eyes had been unusually dry, possibly due to the weather, and she needed to get eye drops. She then thanked Max for helping her earlier, mentioning that she would not have been able to find her entry card without his assistance. Max flinched slightly, but told her it was fine. Patrick asked if that was all that had happened and had expected something juicier. Meanwhile, Esther winked at Max. He exhaled in relief. He just survived this one. But Joy continued to watch him with a suspicious gaze. Moments later, at the cafe, Max found himself completely drained, both physically and emotionally, from everything he had been dealing with lately. With so much weighing on him, concentrating on work had become increasingly difficult. He had quietly reached the conclusion that he needed to limit his interactions with his coworkers, especially when it came to Esther and Joy, in order to avoid unnecessary tension and drama. As he collected his order, his usual chamomile tea, he hoped it would help steady his nerves and ease the anxious, jittery feeling that had been clinging to him. What he did not expect was to hear Joy calling out his name. The sound nearly startled the life out of him. He immediately asked what she was doing there, clearly surprised, but she mentioned his tea. She thought he normally prepared it himself in the office lounge. Max explained that he needed some fresh air and, in turn, asked why she was not getting her drink from her usual spot. Joy casually mentioned that she had a gift card expiring the next day and did not want it to go to waste. For a brief moment, Max considered waiting for her, but quickly decided it would be better to head back alone, though it was clear that decision was never going to hold. Joy admitted she was bored and suggested they walk back together. Max could only sigh inwardly, realizing yet again that he never seemed to catch a break. While they walked, Joy asked whether he planned to attend the team dinner scheduled for later that week. He told her he would show up, eat, and then leave immediately afterward. She fell silent, studying him in a way that made him uneasy, and he began to wonder what was on her mind. Then, without warning, she asked whether he still felt awkward around her. The question caught him completely off guard. Joy explained that it was the impression she had been getting. He appeared relaxed around Esther, yet noticeably stiff when interacting with her, and she wanted to know if there was a reason for it. Max found himself reflecting on her words. When they had first met, he had indeed felt awkward around her, and she had been the one trying to break the ice between them. He finally explained that when it came to her and Patrick, they were on the same team and would inevitably work closely together, which meant constant communication. Because of that, he might have come across as distant simply because he was trying to maintain professionalism and respect as a coworker and teammate. Joy then asked whether that meant the closer he was to someone professionally, the more emotional distance he felt the need to keep. Max admitted that it did. Her reaction suggested disappointment, and he could not help but wonder why. He went on to add that since they had become accountability partners, she was actually the person he felt closest to at work. That statement caused her to pause, as if something about his words had sparked something within her. Meanwhile, Max continued sipping his tea absent-mindedly. Only then did it occur to him that what he had said might have sounded strange. Before he could clarify himself, Joy spoke again, remarking that their conversation had turned out to be far more interesting than she had expected. At that, Max's heart rate spiked instantly, leaving him wondering what exactly she meant by that. Unfortunately, this is where the story pauses for now. That single conversation changes everything. Joy's reaction suggests there is more beneath the surface than Max is ready to face. Meanwhile, Esther's unresolved emotions and sudden closeness add another layer of tension he can't escape. What began as workplace professionalism is quietly turning into emotional exposure. And the more Max tries to step back, the deeper he seems to fall into the situation. If you would like to know what happens next, be sure to let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.